Israel and Palestine's conflict has deep historical roots, and the recent escalation in violence has drawn international attention once again. The ongoing attacks by Israel on Palestine are part of a broader conflict that spans decades, driven by territorial, political, and religious tensions. Here's a detailed story that outlines the situation. The conflict between Israel and Palestine has its origins in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when waves of Jewish immigrants began arriving in Palestine, then under the Ottoman Empire, seeking to establish a homeland in response to anti-Semitism in Europe. The situation intensified after World War I, when the British took control of Palestine and issued the Balfour Declaration in 1917, supporting the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, while also promising to protect the rights of the Arab inhabitants. After World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust, international support for the creation of a Jewish state grew. In 1947, the United Nations proposed partitioning Palestine into two states, one Jewish, one Arab. The Jewish community accepted the plan, but Arab nations and Palestinian leaders rejected it, leading to the 1948 Arab-Israeli War following the creation of Israel. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced, a key moment known as the Nakba, or catastrophe, in Palestinian history. The core of the conflict today revolves around Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. In the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel captured the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, areas that are considered part of historic Palestine. These territories are home to millions of Palestinians who have lived under Israeli occupation for over 5 decades. Israel has built settlements in the West Bank, considered illegal under international law, but Israel disputes this. East Jerusalem, which Palestinians see as the capital of their future state, has been a flashpoint for violence. Israeli policies aimed at consolidating control over the city, including evictions of Palestinian families from neighborhoods like Sheikh Jarrah, have provoked widespread anger. The Gaza Strip, home to around 2 million Palestinians, has been under a strict Israeli blockade since 2007, when the Palestinian political group Hamas took control of the area. Israel considers Hamas a terrorist organization, while Hamas views itself as a resistance movement against Israeli occupation. The blockade has severely restricted movement in and out of Gaza, crippling the economy and creating what the United Nations has called a humanitarian crisis. Gaza has seen multiple wars and military operations, with civilians often caught in the crossfire. The most recent violence began in October 2023, when tensions boiled over in East Jerusalem. The flashpoint came when Israeli settlers attempted to seize Palestinian homes in Sheikh Jarrah, sparking widespread protests. Israeli security forces responded with force, raiding Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of Islam's holiest sites, during the holy month of Ramadan. These actions were met with outrage across the Muslim world and led to rocket fire from Gaza into Israeli cities. Israel responded with a massive military operation, targeting Hamas leaders and infrastructure in Gaza. Israeli airstrikes have hit densely populated areas, killing civilians, including women and children, and causing widespread destruction. UN reports estimate hundreds of Palestinians dead and thousands injured in the ongoing campaign. In response, Hamas has fired thousands of rockets into Israel, aiming at cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, though many are intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome defense system. While the damage in Israel has been relatively limited compared to the destruction in Gaza, the fear and anxiety among Israelis are palpable, with civilians regularly forced to seek shelter. The international community has been deeply divided over the conflict. Western countries, including the United States, have largely supported Israel's right to defend itself, condemning Hamas rocket fire while calling for restraint from Israel. President Biden has affirmed America's support for Israel, but also called for de-escalation. However, many countries and human rights organizations, including the UN, have criticized Israel for its disproportionate use of force and the humanitarian impact of its airstrikes in Gaza. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have accused Israel of committing war crimes by targeting civilian areas. Protests have erupted in cities worldwide, with demonstrators calling for an end to the occupation and greater rights for Palestinians. As Israel continues its airstrikes, the humanitarian situation in Gaza worsens. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that the damage to Gaza's infrastructure is catastrophic. Hospitals are overwhelmed with the injured, many of whom are children. Gaza's sole power plant has shut down, leaving large parts of the region without electricity and clean water. The World Health Organization has warned of an imminent health crisis, with medical supplies rapidly running out. The death toll continues to rise, with thousands of homes destroyed and tens of thousands of Palestinians displaced. Israeli officials maintain that their strikes are aimed at Hamas's military infrastructure, but human rights groups argue that the civilian cost is too high. The violence has led to growing calls for a ceasefire. The United Nations Security Council has met several times, though it has been unable to pass a resolution due to disagreements among member states. Diplomatic efforts led by countries like Egypt and Qatar are ongoing, but both sides remain entrenched in their positions. Israel demands that Hamas stop firing rockets, while Hamas insists that Israel end its occupation and lift the blockade on Gaza. As the violence continues, the road to peace seems distant. Many experts believe that unless there is a serious effort to address the root causes of the conflict, particularly Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories and the lack of a viable state for Palestinians, the cycle of violence will continue.